Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our Catering.com Leadership Collaborative live sessions. I can see the number of attendees is ticking up, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a chat to intro to give everyone a chance to join us today. I hope you're all well. I hope you're having a good week despite obvious challenges at the moment. And I guess the events of this week make today's webinar even more important, because today we'll be talking about well-being as a core leadership focus. And by that, we mean your own well-being as a leader, but also the well-being, of course, of your teams. And my name's Cathy Dybel. I am Head of Marketing for Catering.com, and I'm delighted that in our session today, we'll be joined by Jane Sunley, who is CEO of Purple Cubed and founder of Wellbee. We'll also be joined by Julia Edmonds, who is Managing Director of Lexington Catering, and we'll be joined by Sean Wheeler, who is People and Culture Consultant at the Grand Hotel Birmingham. So a brilliant panel, really well experienced, lots to draw on, really personable individuals. So do ask questions throughout the session, put them in the chat function, and we will endeavour to answer those at the end of the session. But if we can't get round to you, then we will ask the delegates and the panel rather to answer your questions afterwards. So, whatever you need, make full use of the session, just let us know what you need to know. So when we say well-being today, we are, of course, it's important to look after our own well-being. So we've probably seen a lot of advice over the last 6 months about getting enough sleep, eating well, exercising, meditation, and all those things are brilliant, very important. But what we're also talking about today is well-being as a day-to-day focus, building resilience of teams and making it part of the everyday at work, and also well-being as a business benefit. So the reason we should focus on well-being as a strategic leadership focus. So before further ado, I'm going to introduce Jane. Jane, can you turn your video and your camera on, please?
Hi.
There she is. Great. Morning, Jane. Welcome. Good to have you here. So today, Jane and I are going to be talking about well-being, as we've said, but specifically her own focus on well-being in terms of a business focus, as well as the right thing to do for human beings and ourselves. So we're going to be talking through with Jane, and then after that, we will introduce Julia and Sean, and we will then have a conversation from their perspective. So, Jane, do you want to introduce yourself and let everyone know, if they don't already know you, who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Jane Sunley. My main job is I was the founder and I'm now the CEO of Purple Cubed, which is a consultancy / tech business working in the field of culture, employee engagement, helping organisations to be a great place to work, primarily in hospitality, but we also work outside. In a nutshell, I also write business books and do a whole load of other mentoring and things like that.
Multi-talented, lots of experience, particularly in this field. So let's start with the meaning of well-being, because perhaps each person has their own definition. What do we mean by well-being, and why does it matter so much, especially now?
Well, I'll start with why it matters, because we've all taken a bit of a pounding, haven't we? Or a lot of a pounding lately. And even before the recent events of the recent months, there was a huge wellbeing crisis in the UK and beyond. And something like 1 in 4 people have a wellbeing issue. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. And if you look back to the last recession, sorry, but we'll just do it briefly, there was a massive spike in mental wellbeing issues after that. So we were in a bit of a state anyway, and now it's got to critical points. And the reason it's important is because if you're not well and your teams aren't well, it might sound obvious, I'll say it anyway, you're not going to perform in the right way. And it impacts the customer and profitability and growth and all of those things. But what happens with wellbeing is it sometimes kind of falls down people's lists. And that's sometimes because people don't really know what to do about it. Over half of employers in the UK want to do something but don't really know what. So what happens is you end up getting initiatives thrown at it, which is fine, as you were saying, eat healthily and do yoga, etc. That's fine. But there's lots of sort of undiagnosed conditions where people are throwing these solutions and hoping they're going to be okay. And actually it can make people feel worse sometimes. So I think what we're saying here is, look, it's not just about mental health, it's not just about physical health, it's about purpose and happiness, and the whole thing all tied up. You know, we talk about the employee experience, talk about employee engagement. It's all tied up in that whole well-being piece, and that's why it's so important, fundamental to everything we do, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of explaining it. The resilience and the fulfillment, the happiness. Sometimes when we talk about being happy in the workplace, and there's quite a lot of stuff around about that at the moment in the media, it sounds a bit flippant, but what we mean is all of those things, you know, fulfillment, well-being and productivity and purpose. And to your point, you know, offering the solutions but not really knowing how to help. I saw this week on, I won't say where, but I was in a live session where somebody asked, well, thank you for the yoga, but we need real support. And I was really struck by that. You know, free fruit and yoga and meditation is important, yeah, but where that individual clearly felt they needed more support. So,
I mean, I think sorry, go on.
Go on. We're going to have a chat now. All the questions are going to go out the window.
Things are great. Well, that's good. Those things are great. Okay, or, you know, and it's just kind of putting the icing on your already okay cake. But if you're not in a great place, you know, saying to someone, oh, go and do some exercise or eat more healthily or stop drinking, and you're not in a good place, it just makes you feel worse. And I suppose that's the thing, that people don't have the resource to have loads of psychologists on hand and lots of counsellors and all the rest of it. But what you do need to do is identify the people who need specific sorts of help, and then identify what those things are that they need, and then be able to signpost, because that's the answer, really. Because I know people do go, oh, we have got the fruit and that's all good, and, you know, we've got the sleep pod and everything else, great, but it's sort of not enough, because everybody's an individual and people have recalibrated their lives over the last few months, and some of them are in a better place and some of them are in a much worse place, and you don't know who that is if you don't go and find out, really.
Yeah, and there will be the obvious ones, and then there's the ones that are styling it out and not actually necessarily that obvious. So we'll definitely come back to that topic of the how later on, but let's also then try to go in order of thinking. You know, why should the people on this call, why should employers, why should leaders take the well-being of their teams very seriously?
Well, I think, as I said, they're not going to perform if they're not well, and you can't be putting them through. I mean, you know, it's a harrowing time for everybody. It's very, very difficult, and you need to be in tip-top condition to be able to do that, because you know, you can't function. But also, people have long memories, and people will remember through this time who's been kind and who's looked after them, and who the employers are who have been seen to do the right things, and who won't. And I know we haven't got a labour crisis now, but a year from now, or whenever it's going to be, we'll be back where we've been for the last few decades, saying we can't get enough people in this industry, and how do we get them in? And now we're losing a whole load because through no fault of anybody, so we can't do anything about that. But, you know, they will remember if you looked after them. You know, Julie will tell you later, you know, they're doing things for what they're calling their Lex alumni, so the people they've had to let go, they're still going to look after them, they're still part of their family. People remember things like that, you know, and if you want to be an employer of choice, that's the reputation you want to have, really.
So it's your reputation, it's your employer brand, it's your future proofing, I guess, but also it's the resilience, the robust nature of your teams that you have now to see you through whatever lies ahead. And this whatever lies ahead is not a short haul. We're looking at a long haul, a steep climb, and those individuals have already been through quite a lot, as you rightly say. So whether you're at any level, it doesn't really matter what your role is. We're all human beings at the end of the day, and we all have our own stresses and strains. So is that, I guess that's what you're saying, isn't it? Is that the investment now will pay you back now and on into the future.
And you said at the beginning, you know, it's for the people on this webinar as well as their teams, because you do get a lot of self-sacrificing leaders in this industry. I mean, I know because I used to work on it, and we go, oh, you know, we can do it, we'll do 90 hours or whatever and just sort it out and make everything all right for everybody else. And I think leaders have an obligation to themselves to look inwards and say, well, am I okay? And because you can't keep suppressing these things, eventually it blows, and that's why we've got to head these things off proactively and not wait till there's an issue.
Yes, that question we often ask of our teams, how are you? Really, how are you? But perhaps the first question is, how am I today?
I think
Because if I'm not in a good place, how can I help anyone else? I guess. One of those things. Okay, so let's think about getting to introducing these wellbeing initiatives then. So if we all accept that it's worth doing for people as humans and ourselves as humans, but also for the business, then what is it that business leaders should be doing to introduce wellbeing initiatives into their workplaces?
Okay, so I want everybody to think about it not as a separate initiative, but as part of the fabric of what they do. Right. So, for example, communication is a massive part of well-being, because you don't feel great if you don't know what's going on, if there are rumours flying around, you're getting conflicting information, you don't know what's the next thing around the corner. So I think start with the fundamental parts of what you do anyway, and think how is this going to land with people's well-being. So throughout the pandemic, I think people have been very good at communicating with people working at home and people on furlough and all the rest of it. But you've got to keep that up now and keep finding out what's changing and keeping telling people and informing them. So I think weave it into the fabric. Don't go, oh, well-being, I know, let's get mental health first aid. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But don't do that, tick the box and go, we've done well-being. It's not that. It's about looking at every stage of the employee journey and thinking, how is that going to affect someone's well-being? And as I say, communication is massive. So if you're going to start anywhere, start there before you start doing all the other things. You've got hospitality action, you've got great employee assistance programs, all of those things, factor it in. Think about the basic things you're doing internally, as well as just buying in a whole load of solutions.
Okay, so I know that we've talked about this before, and you've talked a little bit about being confident and reassuring in your tone, the kind of the approach, because often that might be part of the challenge. I might know how to signpost and I might know roughly what I might want to bring in terms of systems, but how do I even start that conversation? How should I respond? The tone that leaders need to take in these often quite awkward situations.
Yeah, and I think that's about being honest and transparent, because there's a bit of a myth a few years ago that there was a slight parent-child relationship with leaders in this industry, where they thought they had to protect their people and make it all okay, but actually they're grown up and they're an adult just the way as you and I are, and actually they want to know what's going on. So I do think start from a place where it's, look, I'm going to tell you how it is. I didn't make it like this. I'm doing my best. This is how it is. And being really honest. That's where the rumours start, when you try and cover things up and kind of hope they're going to be okay. So I think start, we're all in this together. Let's solve it together. It's been a great time over the last months, although there's been awful stuff going on, that people have come together and worked out how they're going to do things more than I've ever seen before, and which is really healthy. It's going to go away. The whole talk about leadership, the whole kind of command and control thing is just dead now, because people have worked at home and they've been all right and they've been productive and it's worked. And I know not everybody in this industry can do that, but I think people have realised that actually we do employ adults who are responsible and want to do a good job on the whole. So the whole leadership style is changing to one of bringing people together and looking after their well-being and making sure they've got the circumstances to do a good job, rather than managing the hell out of it.
And people are therefore receptive to this conversation, aren't they? It's not a conversation that people won't want to have. All right, so they may not need to tap into it so much at this minute, perhaps if as an individual, but everyone's all ears with these initiatives. Would you say that's your experience, that people are more receptive to hearing about wellbeing now than they have been?
I think so. I think a lot of people are talking about it and not doing anything about it, though. I mean, everybody goes, oh, yes, it's so important. And you say to them, so what are you actually doing? Oh, well,
right.
We've got operational stuff right, or we've got to get the training right. And I get that, but sorry, that's my other phone. So it's like
it's live, folks.
Yeah, so I think some people want to know, some people don't. For my view on the communication stuff is, rather than pushing stuff out, just find somewhere where people can go to get the information. So if you are doing about wellbeing or benefits or anything else, there needs to be some sort of central place that people can go when they need to go to find out what they need to know then. Because you know when you know, people communicate things out and they go, oh, nobody takes it in, nobody listens. Well, of course they don't. They've got a million other things to do. So switch the communication from top down, here it is, grab it while it's there, to if you want to know stuff, ask us or go and look in this place.
Yeah.
And you can sit wellbeing stuff there. There might be some people who aren't the slightest bit interested in doing anything about their wellbeing because they feel absolutely fine. That's fine. There might be some people who really need help. And it is back to the individual. Everybody's different and we can't just treat people the same, really.
So that idea of a self-service hub, if you like, where, you know, because at the end of the day, business leaders are not mental health professionals, they're not well-being professionals. It's part of their duty of care and responsibility, but they can't diagnose. So presenting it there and saying self-service is the way that you would recommend, rather than trying to bring everybody along on the journey with you.
Because there are different degrees of help, aren't there? So, you know, some people might just want a bit of information or might want signposting to Mind or to NHS or to somebody else. You know, it's sort of light touch until it needs not to be. Don't kind of overwhelm people with everything when they might just not need that anyway.
Okay, so we've started to sort of talk into the area of my next question, which was, you know, what should business leaders be putting in place now? And so you're already talking about this, aren't you? So, to enable well-being and engagement, which are linked.
Yeah,
so
I think there's quite a bit around, as we're bringing people back to work, I think there is a sort of re-onboarding situation, if you like, where you are doing a lot of fact-finding and a lot of listening around where people are, how they feel, what's changed in their lives. You know, there are people now going, actually, I think I want to work part-time now, or actually, I want to go and do something else. So, you know, you need to know that, because everybody's not just going to come back and it's all going to be exactly the same. For some it will, maybe. So I think there's a big listening piece around, you know, asking the right questions, and there's loads of stuff on the website about this, but you know, where you can find out exactly what's going on and listen, and then think about, actually, how am I going to fulfill those needs? And don't assume you know what people need, because you don't.
Yeah, so that need find, I guess, which again is a skill in itself. I mean, how far is that the responsibility of the leaders, the team leaders, the people managers, to really diagnose? Because that's kind of, you know, we've got to get this clear, haven't we? Create a hub of content where people can self-service, but also need find. Yeah, there's a balance.
I mean, we did put this on the website, I think, but we designed a kind of back to work kind of questionnaire, not a sort of survey, but not just a kind of thing that you could send out that goes, how are you feeling, and what's changed in your life, and how you're coping with other commitments, and all of those kind of things. Just knowing the right questions to ask, really simply, without opening a whole can of worms kind of thing, but you know, just to find out what's going on.
And that's on the Purple Cube website.
Yeah, I'm sure there's information. If you look at there's one called Back to Business question.
Okay, so that's a bit of signpost for everyone on here then to go and have a look along there. Okay, so what about being mindful then? So what are the things we're looking out for when we start this process? Let's say you've identified that you want to build a body of support for individuals, whether you build your own or you use an external provider. You also then start to go through the process of need finding. What are the watch outs, if you like? What do people need to be mindful of in that process?
I think if you feel out of your depth and don't know what to do with all this information, then absolutely go and ask someone. And I know people are going, oh, we've no money at the moment, and I get that, but it's sort of false economy not to do the right thing, because if you get it wrong, you know, it's almost teaching on a knife edge at the moment. There are some people who are really not in a great place. So I think if you don't know how to deal with it, go and find out, rather than thinking, yeah, I'll do the tick box kind of thing. And just, you know, don't that people don't need. I mean, you know, you don't know what that is until you ask them, as I say. But make it simple. Resist the urge to buy 10 things. Just have a look. I mean, we'll talk a bit later, I'm sure, but the diagnostic of being is massively, massively important, and enabling people to self-assess themselves, because you don't know. they know themselves and just giving them that ability, then you can start to craft what the wellbeing strategy looks like. We're getting quite a lot of people ringing, can you put as a wellbeing strategy? Well, not really, because actually if your culture's awful, you could put 100 fabulous tools in, but if your culture's awful and your managers are toxic, then it's just not going to work. So I think, you know, it's back to the basics, right, really? You know, if you have a kind workforce, I'm not saying being soppy and wet and not decisive, but I'm saying be kind to people and, you know, have leaders who can lead in the right empathetic way right now, then that's a big step towards improving people's well-being. You know, I hear about toxic bosses. I mean, it's mad, really, sadly.
So cultural shift, obviously you can't wait for a culture to shift to a kind culture if you don't already have one. Don't hold off on the well-being though. Let's just be clear, you know, your people still need support, but that cultural shift and that evidence needs to come from all, not just from the top, from all areas. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the obvious one, which is some people are not returning to the workplace because there are redundancies. And you mentioned Julia's Lex alumni and how people can be looked after, but we, you know, in the very fundamental basics, some people are coming back and some people are not. And that's something that's happened to the industry. And there's been some really difficult decisions for everyone to have to make, letting very good people go, though they may not want to because those roles are not needed. Talk to me a little bit about how that dynamic within a workplace in terms of well-being. You know, you've mentioned to me before the sort of survivor guilt and those that are made redundant. What do we need to consider around all of that?
Yeah, I think don't underestimate survivor guilt, because we spend these times building these teams. We put a lot of effort into building teams and getting them working well together, and they're supporting each other and they're friends. You know, if you do one of those Gallup surveys, it says, do you have a friend at work kind of thing. You know, it's really important in our industry that people get on. And now all of a sudden, you know, some companies have got rid of half of them. And it's almost not quite as bad as a bereavement, but it's a very, very sad situation for the people left behind. And lots of them do feel guilty. It's survivor guilt, and it's a very real thing. And I know that phrase is coined from the likes of, you know, disasters and things, but it's the same sort of feelings. So I think don't underestimate that. You know, you probably think, oh, they're really happy to still have their job. They probably feel worse, some of them, they kept their job. People who work in our industry are people who want to make other people feel good. That's why they do service. So if your reason to be is giving other people a good experience and actually seeing your colleagues lose their job, it's quite devastating. And, you know, there is a conversation to be had around that and just making sure that people are supported. And I think a really good way to do that is to also look after those who have gone. I know everybody hasn't got endless resources to do loads of stuff, but there are, talk about it, but there are things you can do to at least the burden a little bit. And I think that rubs off on the survivors. They think, actually, you know, nobody really cares whether I'm here or not, and they are going to look after it in a good way. So it's pretty
okay, so
really.
Yeah. And we'll talk to Sean and Julia about what they've done around this a little bit later. But I think that's a really key point. It's obvious that when you're going at speed and you've got big decisions to make, and sometimes people might start to seem like numbers on a spreadsheet, and then you might lead yourself to think, well, if that one's got a job, then they'd be fine. And if they're me, well, I don't need to worry. And I'm not saying anyone will be as hard-hearted as that necessarily, but in actually how you communicate and the actions that you take, that could come across almost inadvertently. And so it's important to think about those two groups.
It's difficult. With redundancies, there's obviously a very strict legal protocol to follow. But there have been plenty of instances where, of course, you've got to send the legally correct letter. Of course you do. But it's come out of the blue. No one said, look, I'm really sorry this happened, and I'm really, you know, have empathy. I understand, you know, you might want to talk things through. I am going to send you this letter. It's going to seem a bit legal because it is, but do come and talk to me about anything else. So you're sort of humanising that process, because if you get a horrible legal letter in black and white coming through your door on actual paper, you know, or an email, then, you know, it's really devastating to see it in black and white.
Yeah, I
So
have heard a fair few stories like that. I guess where a company is making hundreds of people redundant at one go, it might seem like a stretch to ring them all first, but they're all human beings at the end of the day. So I guess the ideal would be to treat them as such.
you have to make 1,000 phone calls, you know, other people do it. And even if you just write to them a really nice note to go with it or something, you know, it doesn't have to be a phone call. I think some people have absolutely pushed the boat out and made loads of phone calls to people and you know, genuinely
Yes.
express empathy. And that is powerful stuff, particularly if
Yeah.
you survive.
That will be remembered. Okay, so talk about your own business at Purple Cubed. You've got a great team there that you've worked with for a while, but what have you been doing to support their well-being during the last 6 months in particular?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we're a very people-centric business, so we put them right at the centre and said, whatever happens, we're going to make sure these people get paid and they get looked after. And you know, we may all owe the government money now and things, but you know that you've got to get your priorities right, don't you? Clearly, we absolutely went all out on communication on different levels. So on yesterday we went to find stuff, but we had daily check-ins which they didn't have to attend, but some people did, some people didn't. Just a 9 o'clock call every day. We did social stuff, you know, all learned to play poker. Well, some people were already, but you know, just a few different things, but nothing that was you know was obligatory. You know, they could have some freedom about what they did. And you know, we've got one guy who said, actually, I really love working at home. I know everyone will come into the office again, and we could do that because we're office based. But you know, and then we've got others who turned up to everything because they really missed each other. So I think there is that, just putting things in place and making sure that they're clear. I mean, we talk to them every month about cash and that, you know, things are okay and they're going to get paid and everything's fine. Because actually, all you're really worried about is whether you're going to get paid at the end of the month, whether you've still got a job. All the other things is like besides the point. So I think you've got to put yourself in that person's shoes and think, what would I want to know if I was in that situation? And it builds trust. I think if you're transparent, you know, people never ask me, are we okay? Because they know we're okay, because we tell them exactly why and how and all of that. And I know we're a small business and it's easier for us and you don't have to give every bit of information, but you do need to give those reassurances and be honest about it, really. So I think we did a lot around that. We did our own back to work survey to see what had changed. I now know that Alex never wants to come to the office ever again. You know, that's okay.
But you're good with that because it's people first and it's whatever they need, I guess, as much as is possible and plausible. Sometimes these things are not possible, but where possible. Yeah. Okay. Right. So just wanted to say to everyone listening in and watching, do get your questions into the chat function as we're going along, because we're covering a lot of different topics here, a lot of ground. And if you've got questions, please do ask and Jane will answer them at the end. Okay, so I want to talk about, I'm going to use that phrase, the new normal, although I am a bit fed up of that phrase because it's like, oh, it's 6 months in now, this is change is the new normal. But what do you think this means then? What is the new environment looking like for leaders, and what skills are leaders going to need to navigate through the next 6, 12, 18 months?
I think it's accelerated the need for the softer skills, for nurturing and empathy and listening, and those types of traits that, you know, the days of kind of, you know, great dictatorships and you know, massive decisiveness and all the decisions being made in a boardroom have sort of gone, because actually nobody knows more about your business than the people on the front line. So I think there is a piece around understanding and looking around and knowing what goes on, and that's that listening word. So I think they just do need to be super empathetic and super kind right now. And I get that everybody's a bit stressed and trying to do it, but you can't take it out on your people. You've got to find outlets. You know, I know people are feeling quite on edge at the moment, but you've almost got to find a way to deal with that. I've just written a blog this morning actually on resilience again, because I think people, just the resilience piece at the moment is so big.
Yeah.
Just it up. And you know, resilience is like training your muscles almost. So I don't think you're born with it. I think you just keep honing it and making it stronger and looking for the opportunities in that. And I think that's what people need to be doing. And it's have a little crack up one day, but do it in the right way and have the right outlet for it. You know, you're not perfect and made in stone, really.
Yeah.
Some heart.
Yes, that's so two interesting thoughts here now, which is one, when people hear the words empathy and compassion, they often imagine, you know, everyone giving each other a virtual hug and being quite soft about it. It's not a softness though, is it? It's a leadership strength.
Absolutely.
We have a number of sessions on this where I've heard many people saying the same thing, that empathy is strength and something that needs to be practiced. You have to practice empathy, especially in a leading environment, a leadership environment. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's not all about being all cuddly and fluffy and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, there are some quite tough, really tough hotel general managers. I mean, I think of people like Joanne Taylor-Stad, Beck, people like that, who are really tough, really strong leaders, but also super empathetic. So it isn't about being all fluffy. It's about being very strong, but in a compassionate way. And if you can get that balance, I think that's what makes a good leader these days, really.
Yeah, and those are the skills. Those are the skills people are looking for within their businesses when they are hiring. And there are people are hiring at the moment. There's not much mention of this, but certainly on catering.com we can see people are hiring. And those are absolutely some of the skills they're looking for. Yes, experience and work experience. Yes, business acumen. Yes, leadership strength. But one of those leadership strengths, a very core part of it is, you know, who are you? Who are you in a crisis? Who are you in terms of well-being and your treatment of others and your views of others? I think you're right that this crisis has brought that to the fore. Though we know it was important before, now it's absolutely crucial. Okay, so you've also said to me before that much as we look at ourselves to see what we've learned from the experience of the last 6 months, and how, you know, it often takes a crisis to build resilience, doesn't it? So we've all started to build resilience, but you've also said that you talk to their teams to understand what they have learned about themselves and the business over the last 6 months. And then you made the point there that no one knows the business better than your frontline workers. So those things come together, don't they? Are you saying that listening to your people will help you build your strongest strategy?
I think so. It's unbelievable the ideas that people have. I mean, you see it even just as a customer sometimes, and people, you hear people talking and they go, I don't know why we do it like this, you know, and actually, but they don't dare speak because it's not their place or whatever else. Whereas if someone said, you know, how would you make this better? Or what would you start doing that you're not doing now? Or what would you stop doing that you're doing now? Those kind of conversations. And it's not about training courses, it's just having conversations with people, or having channels where they can give and receive feedback. Because if you can get an open dialogue, an open two-way dialogue on an ongoing basis, you find out all sorts of amazing stuff. It's like having hundreds of unpaid, well, they are paid, but consultants almost looking at your business. They do know. They are really smart.
Yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? And I guess as well, if you've got that dialogue, you're then increasing engagement from your workforce, and you are then increasing a sense of fulfillment, which then will lead to happiness and well-being. So it is absolutely connected. Okay, on to the last couple of questions with you now, Jane, because, you know, we could probably carry on with this conversation for the rest of the hour, but that would be wrong and unfair to Sean and Julian. Let's just touch as a last point on resilience, building resilience in yourself and your teams. Have you got any final tips there on, okay, so if everyone's listening to this, they know it's important, to build it in themselves and their team, but how? What are your top tips around that?
I think there's 3 areas. One is the physical, so looking after yourself, you know, and it is back to the eating properly and getting enough sleep, but making sure that you are physically in the best state, because if you're not feeling very strong, or you're just feeling generally unwell, it's really hard to be resilient. So there's physical, mental. So first one's that. The second one is mental. That is about turning negatives into positives. And I know that's easier said than done, but you sort of have to do that. And there's a there's a big thing with people dwelling on and getting angry about and losing their mind over things that have happened that you can do nothing about. And I know, you know, it's all very well for me to say that, but and we all go, oh no, what's happened now? But you can't let it sap your energy. You've got to put your energy into, so what can I do about it? So I think there's the mental aspect of taking responsibility and saying, okay, I'm going to make the best of a bad job. And there are loads of innovations coming out at the moment. There are all sorts of people who, you know, you've seen people who've changed their businesses for the better, actually, which never would have happened. And I'm not saying we should all go around changing our businesses, but I do think there's a piece around how can I use what I know now? How can I take this adverse situation? So the mental aspect of just training your brain to flip over into the positive is really important. And then the third thing I think is learning, is just all the time, what have I learned from this? And changing your thinking. So you're not doing things the way you did them before, because it just doesn't kind of work. Yeah. Chatting away in the background, can you hear them?
There's always one.
Like your own training, your resilience training course, your resilience assault course, and I suppose you could just think every day, I think of all the things that I've had to overcome in the past, and I think, well, if I could do that, I could do this one. So
Yes.
Get a bit of self-coaching, and also right, what am I going to do today that's just going to make me a bit more resilient? And I think supporting others actually is good for that.
That's fantastic. I think for anyone, whether they're in hospitality or not, that's, you know, day-to-day stuff. Particularly, I think what resonates with me, and I have been having conversations about this with my own colleagues at work, is which things can I control and therefore are worth me investing my energy in, and which things are just, they're just going to happen whether I like it or not. So I'm not saying ignore them, but just your reaction to them is can be more measured, and it's that balance of energies. You can't do everything. Okay, now I want to talk, and I know that you won't want to talk about Wellbee in too much detail, because, you know, that's the way you are, Jane. You want people to find out about it rather than you tell them. But I want you to tell everyone about Wellbee, because it's your latest innovation and it's a fantastic product. So how can it help people?
Okay, so before all of this started, we knew about the wellbeing crisis and said, let's do something about wellbeing, and let's make it super affordable. I'll tell you what it is in a minute. In fact, it's free to less than 15 people, but make it super affordable and nice and cool and easy to use. So what Wellbee is a tool that enables people to self-diagnose their own wellbeing across a whole range of areas, under 3 broad areas of happiness, purpose, and health. And so you can go in and there's a little icon thing that says how you're feeling about this and that and the other, and then it uses AI. Let's go into AI here, but it uses AI to diagnose make some recommendations. So if you're in super tip-top well-being health, it'll probably say, actually, we don't need to make you any recommendations, but perhaps you could go and support some other people in these areas because you're particularly strong in it. And if you're in a really, really bad place, it might say, look, we're not going to give you recommendations. We think you need to go and talk to someone, and this is how you could have that conversation. And the recommendations are there if you want them, but we don't want to inundate people with a whole load of stuff to make them feel worse. But most people will fall in the middle. So they might have some issues around finance right now, or health, or mental stuff, or a whole range of issues. And it's just full of really practical tools, videos, questionnaires you can fill in around assertiveness, stuff like that, that it'll say, actually, you know, you could work on your assertiveness, first do a bit more work on that, and then here's how you can get some help. Or it will signpost to an EAP or to Mind or to the NHS. So it's not counsellors all sitting there, which would make it very expensive, but it's sensible, safe advice. It's all been looked at by psychologists, etc. That it's sensible, safe advice that people can have. So you can put it in. It costs nothing to set up, and it's really easy. You just sort of press a button and put your people in, really, and then they can just go ahead and use it. There are all sorts of tools about how to implement it, etc. But then some people use it every week. I mean, I've got people in our business that use it and say to me, oh, I learned something else today about whatever. Sort of learning tool in terms of your own self improvement journey. And it's really weird because actually we accelerated because of what was going on, and then we got some interest from some business schools. So we've done a student version called Wellbee Student, and the local Costa yesterday who picked it up and using it. So it's a really, it's one of those universal appeal things because it's simple. Everybody's sort of going, oh, that's a good idea. And we've just done we're just in the middle of doing a free version for anybody who's been made redundant, which obviously will sit on your hub and anywhere else that wants it to sit, so that I think employers could say, look, here's something to look after your well-being, even though we're not here. So Lex are putting it on their alumni, and so I think there's a bit of spreading the love through some free stuff, but also it's super affordable. So I guess it's, instead of chucking solutions at it, it's an assessment and recommendation tool, which makes it different. Does that make sense?
Yes, so it makes all the things we've been talking about that much easier, because you've got it there, it's intuitive. I've certainly had a look around it and it's really easy to use. It is intuitive. It takes you as far into the detail as you individually need to go based upon your answers, which I particularly like, rather than serving you up with masses of everything all at once. And so we can send a link to everybody who's on this call and they can have a look around, see if it works for them. But it's a fantastic tool. Okay, thank you, Jane. I'm now going to ask Sean and Julia to join us, turn on their cameras. Here they are. Sean gone. Sean's gone to get tea. Oh, no, there we go. Hello, okay. Thank you for joining us. And before we go any further, would you like to introduce yourselves so everyone knows who you are? Julia, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Julia Edmonds, and I'm the Managing Director for Lexington Catering.
And
Sean?
hi, everyone. I'm Sean Wheeler, and I'm a people and culture consultant at the moment at the Grand in Birmingham, but I've been in the industry for a long time, working with lots of different hotel brands and other.
And thank you. I'm sure that many, if not all of the people on the call will know you as well as they know Jane. So fantastic panel. Okay, so you've been listening to what Jane's been saying, and I know you have your own thoughts around this and how you've applied the various approaches to ensuring well-being in your teams within your own spheres of work. But let's start with, that really, which is, what key lessons have you learned in the last 6 months about well-being and about managing well-being in teams? Obviously, it's been an extraordinary time. What have your key learnings been?
Shall I go first, Sean? So yeah, it has been an extraordinary time. I think what our experience has been, if you like, is just what a rapidly changing environment we've had to navigate our way through. And I think that what's been interesting is the pace at which things have been changing. I've never experienced anything like it in my whole career. And being able to respond incredibly quickly, react, and to provide help and advice to people as they're going through it all, has been, I think, the one thing that's tested people's resilience the most, I would say, because we're having to make quick decisions with very little information, and also reassure people that things have been changing. So we've had to learn to be very reactive when normally we're quite proactive. We consider, we plan, and now we're just literally working on truth. And for some people who absolutely thrive in that environment, and there's other people that find it incredibly difficult. So it's really about, I think, listening to and everybody sharing and collaborating together. I think bringing teams together when you're in a crisis. I've been totally amazed by the way some people have absolutely stepped up, and actually it's really helpful to other people who are struggling, and actually bringing people together, collaborating and sharing has probably been the thing that's brought us all through as a team. And has given us strength as a team. It's always been like that. I think it's been really intensified. And I think you learn a lot more about people when you're in a crisis than perhaps you do in other ways. So I think if there's anything, I've probably learned more about my team than I have before, and really what makes us do tick. And everybody's in a slightly different place with it all as well. And I think certainly, I think Jane might have touched on it. People have really been thinking about what this means to their whole life, not just their career, but their whole life. And people are actually making decisions about what they do and how it's going to impact them. So it's been a really, really interesting time. I think because it's, again, Jane's already hit on it, but it's been about communication at every level really, and making sure that everybody can still feel connected to what's going on, whilst they're on furlough, not working, or sitting at home working from home, and really finding ways to keep people connected in a really positive way. And sometimes making each other laugh. My goodness, we've needed that. And find it. Yes, it's been really tough, but let's just try and keep focused and keep positive, and try and find solutions together. So I think in all of that, we learned heaps, I think, and I think that's just probably a little bit about our experience of working through it. Yeah.
That's really illuminating. I love some of the points you've made there, Julia. Thank you. And I especially think, when you say making people laugh, I support that. I don't think that we need to be deadly serious all the time, even though we are in a serious situation. In fact, in many ways, the opposite is true. We need to learn to just realise that, we need to support each other, and we need to keep enjoying life regardless. So that kind of lightness of touch goes a long way. What would you say to that, Sean? You got any jokes for us?
So we've taken a slightly different approach, because we're actually opening a hotel in this environment. So that's been a very interesting time for us. So I suppose what we've done is we've taken a step back and we've looked at what's been going on, how others have been doing some of the things that they've been doing, good practice, bad practice. And we put together, as really from the start, from Jane said, we've started to make sure we've got a bit of a plan. We have linked it right back to our values, and we've got 5 values, and 3 of them are warm, intuitive, and generous. So actually they feed really, really nicely into how we want to look after our people and our guests. And what we've done is we've gone and created a whole suite of what we're calling our colleague promises and our guest promises, which actually has got the well-being approach, all, as Jane suggested, all the way through. Now, we're in a situation where we're bringing new people in, so we don't really know what's going on with their lives at the moment. So one of the biggest things that we're doing is listening, understanding what is going on outside of their work life, and having a much more flexible approach to them coming on board. We've gone on this sort of, you can only do 40 hours and then we won't hire you. We are becoming a lot more flexible to say, what hours can you do, when can you work? I'd rather have someone brilliant for like 10 hours a week than average for like 40. So we have got a lot of choice. I'll be honest, as the markets, we've got a lot of choice, so we are able to really cherry pick, but we're really looking for those people that live and that already have that sort of in here, our value. And then what we're doing is we're making sure that, one, we're reassuring them, come and join us, you're coming to work in a safe environment. I think that's very, very important. 2, that we are there to look, our priority. I would say people work for people. And, the most important thing is you have a happy team. So we want them to be happy, because if they're happy, that's going to rub off on the guest. And the second thing is that we have a series of we're building through the journey that whole well-being strategy. So it isn't as you said earlier, we've got a fruit bowl in the staff canteen, and there's a yoga mat if you want to have a go. Obviously you have to wipe it between use, and because we can only afford one. So you have to, we've looked at how can we weave all of that stuff, and I think the biggest thing is being flexible, being kind, listening, as Jane said, all the way through, because we've hired these people. We want them to feel comfortable and confident. So when they go in front of the guests, they are delivering. They are the brand. They are the brand and the brand of the hotel, and they're delivering that reputation that is already massive in the city without it even opening. So that's our big thing.
So you're drawing on your experience of the past, obviously, and then making changes to that for the new opening in the new environment. So it's all new for you. If I ask you, Julia, what changes have you made in your existing workforce and business to the way you work specifically to support employee wellbeing? Are there 1 or 2 that you can cite that are particularly significant?
Well, wellbeing's actually always been focused for Lexington. So even before lockdown, we very much wanted to ensure that wellbeing was very much part of our employee brand, You know, we were very keen to make sure that we were known as a great family, you know, community to work with, and that's always something that we've been proud of. So I guess I suppose that helped us in a way going into a crisis, because what we have is a very strong group of people that hopefully are quite resilient. And I think one of the things that I'm finding now, 6 months later, is that, you know, as we are constantly changing, the resilience can get a bit tested, I think. And I think what we probably need to do now is say, right, we've got through this crisis, but actually it's going to carry on for some time to come. You know, how can we keep people going, and how can we make sure that people are still in a good place in themselves, but also for their team? So I guess it's just focus the mind a lot on what we're already doing, but also other ways that we can reach out. And some of the things we're thinking about doing, we're looking at our appraisal system at the moment. So we're not necessarily going to focus it purely on performance. It's much more about how people are feeling, where are they at, what do they feel about coming back to work. So we're actually introducing some more questions into our appraisal to ask people how they're feeling, so that when we do, a little bit like Jane was saying earlier, we do start thinking about what initiatives we want to put in place. Actually, let's focus our energy and time on things that people really need right now. And actually change our training plan that we've had started at the beginning of the year. You know, it's gone out the window a bit. And actually, do people really need to understand about being assertive, or do people need help and support in a different way? So we're not necessarily looking. Obviously, a lot of people have been at home, so in some ways it's a bit irrelevant to people when they've not been at work. So it just feels like it's a completely different focus. So we're doing that. We're also rolling out the Wellbee app, which we love. I think the fact that it really is something for themselves, and is very personal and individual to them. That is a great tool as well, because as well we're hoping to get some kind of data from that, which will help us as a business to then think about things we can put in place to help the wider business. So there's a few things there. I think the key thing has been, people will be coming back off furlough. They've been isolated for a long time. Obviously, we've been keeping in touch with people and doing lots of things to reach out to people in all sorts of different ways, but it doesn't get away from the fact that people potentially be coming off furlough. And I think we are wanting to make sure that people come back into a safe environment. So there's been all sorts of things that we've been doing to talk to people, engage with people, through team sessions, whatever it's like, so that we can share important information with them, really, because there's a lot of new measures and legislation that needs to be taken into consideration, and, you know, doing that in a way that we're really comfortable with it. And you know, we've been living and breathing all of this for the last 6 months, and some people haven't, you know, really been not necessarily been in business. So it's really important that they can come back knowing that they're going to stay safe. So those sorts of things. It's and I think long term, you know, we're hoping that by making changes to our and using that information, we can put the right things in place for people. Yeah.
That's really useful, and you've actually answered a lot of the question I had in mind, which was how you prepare leaders. How do you prepare leaders to deal with this sort of thing? How do you prepare your workforce for the long climb ahead? And you know, that you mentioned about resilience waning. I think that's a common feeling across probably the world. You know, that kind of feeling of fatigue and knowing that you've got to keep going, but it is possible with the right support and the right mindset. It is absolutely possible, and that's where we need to get to, isn't it? Sean, coming to you now. You know, you're building a culture, you're creating one within your new opening. So how would you say employers can weave you know, a positive approach to well-being into the culture of their business, so that it really is just from the get-go, this is the way we do things around here?
I mean, I think there has to be some basic things in place. So one of the key, communication is absolutely key. We are in a very fortunate position that, you know, we are starting with a blank canvas. So I think you come up and say, okay, what are the fundamentals? And one of the biggest fundamentals is communication. So we are pushing for a daily communication every morning with the whole team. What's happening? You know, people, guest owners. What are the 3 key stakeholders? What's happening in the press? You know, that's they read a lot of stuff, and we kind of try and allay some of their fears. coffee chats, and that importance of having those coffee chats, that check-ins with people on a regular basis. We're suggesting in the opening stage that everyone should have a sit down at least once a week with their leaders to space. It doesn't have to be long, 10 minutes. How are you? How's it going? What's happening at home? How can we help you? How can we make your life easier? You know, those sort of simple questions can actually go an awful long way. We are going to do a series of small little workshops with our leaders, as Julia said, just to give them, because we've got people coming from very different backgrounds, all new. We've got to create one team where people haven't worked together for a very long time. So we want to create the grand way, if that makes sense, how we do things at the grand. So we are going to do a series of small little workshops, like, you know, having a, how do you have a conversation with someone where they have got challenges at home, like somebody's got, one of their families got COVID-19, how do we deal with that? Do they have to go, how do we allow them to go home early and all? So, you know, so there's consistency. I think that's the key. I think one of the key things is particularly one hotel has to be acting consistent. In addition to that, we are going to use some of the tools available. We're going to sign up for Wellbee. We're signing up for Hospitality Action, EAP. We're offering, looking at other tools such as Pause, which is a great where you can stop and reflect. And there's some, you know, podcasts there that you can reflect. So we're going to give people a series of tools if they need it. As Jane said, signpost people to enable them to do their own self-assessments as well. And I think that one of the key things is making sure that, you know, it is something that is talked about through the leadership meetings, and it's not just, it has to be ingrained in what we do. So, you know, how are your team today? What can we do to help them? Where are the challenges? And making sure that people are, it's not just about business. Listen, we know we've got it's a very long, slow opening for us. We're not doing a big, like, wow, here we are, because it's not the right time to send that sort of message out. So, but what we're doing is we are doing, you know, we want to make sure that people feel safe, the guests feel safe, the colleagues feel safe. So that a big part of the communication is safe systems of work, ways that service style, how we're weaving that service, the COVID practices into our service style, so people feel secure. What tools they've got available, so they've always got the tools. So it's a whole package of things, to be honest, Kathy, that we're building. Yeah. But as Jane said, it's not very different to what a good business would do anyway, but we're highlighting and heightening the listening, the communication, and being there for people when they need you.
Yes, and that's what I'm hearing from both of you, Sean and Julia, is yes, we had this in our DNA anyway, and Sean, obviously you're creating a new strand of DNA, but you'd have brought it with you. But you're just turning the dial up on those things, the communication, the listening, the focus on individuals, and again, making it part of a daily business consideration rather than, well, you know, as you sometimes get with these schemes, well, have we got the yoga mat and the sleep pod and tick, you know, and then we don't have to think about that again. So I think that message is loud and clear that it's now an integral part of what everybody has to do day to day to run a great hospitality business, or indeed any business, you might say. But what is the benefit back then? Let's talk a little bit about that. And it's good to focus on that. What is the benefit back for the business? What makes this part of a successful business strategy? Now, Julia, do you want to speak from your experience first?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think when people are feeling well and feel good about themselves, clearly they're going to perform better than they would if they didn't. You know, apart from the fact we want people to get back in and want them to come to work feeling happy and enjoy what they do, it really is about them performing at their best, and they can do that when they feel good about themselves and about the people that they work with. You know, I guess it's about, you know, you'll get some fantastic ideas from people because they're feeling positive, feeling focused, and feeling that they want to improve things. I mean, I think a lot of the time, you know, people join Lexington because they feel like they want to make a difference, and we give them the opportunity to do that. You know, we've always very much wanted people to feel autonomous, make their own decisions, but just give them the tools, the right tools to be able to do that, the right environment to be able to do that. And so when you do that, you know, people can do amazing things, and you know, they really contribute to the overall success and actually improvement of the business. I think, and a good example of that that is we have a couple of development programs at the moment that we run. One of them's our Aspiring Leaders program. And the end of that program, it's a very bespoke program to each individual, by the way. And they can come up with their own business idea that they then present back to the leadership team at the end of the year. And all of those initiatives we look to implement into the business as a result of that. And we have something else, which is a much more simple idea forum, which is called the Bold Idea. And that is a way of encouraging everybody in the team throughout the whole company to come up with ideas on a regular basis. In fact, it's great just to listen to people and listen to ideas. You know, again, we'll pick a winner out of those and implement those ideas. And you know, that's a way that people can, and of course, recognise people for doing that. So, you know, it's really important that they get the recognition for that. So it's things like that that can help people contribute to the success of the business. And you get a lot more when people are feeling good about themselves and also about the people that they're working with. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's so. When can I start? Sure. Honestly, I mean, it's fantastic to know businesses like this exist within hospitality and that we can get an insight into them in this way. And Sean, anything to add to that from your perspective as to, you know, why it's worth it?
I mean, at the end of the day, your people are your brand, and they are the people that the guests will see every single day. So we need to ensure that they are happy. It's very simple. Happy team equals happy guests equals happy owners. We have to make sure that the people in the front line and everyone that's dealing with the guest or with each other are confident and competent in what they're doing and enjoy coming to work, because that will rub off on everything they do, how they do things in their job every single day. And we've got this extra environment to consider, absolutely. And I think that the safety piece and that sort of communication, the wellbeing piece is key. But I think, no, Julia covered it really, really well. And I think, listen, that the business hasn't changed. We just have to be much more mindful that our guests will be going through challenges as well. So our people need to be much more empathetic with our guests as well, and listening to our guest needs as well, and as well. So that, you know, there's a whole load of people are coming out for the first time in hotels and restaurants, and now they're going back in again. But so we do need to reassure them they're coming to an environment that actually we will look after them and they will feel safe, both our colleagues and our guests.
Fantastic. Okay, what a wealth of advice. And if we haven't gained from this an insight into why it matters for our people and for our businesses and for ourselves to look after the well-being of our teams, and also how we can go about doing that in some quite simple, straightforward ways, but also some more complex ones, if that's the ability of the business, then I don't know where you're going to get that advice other than here. It's really fantastic to have had your insight. I do have a few questions that have come in, but I just want to ask you one final one of my own, which is, you know, not the killer question or anything, but, you know, what's your one key piece of advice that you would give to our listeners and our watchers here on when it comes to building resilience and well-being for their teams? What's the first and most important thing that you should do? Jane, you go first because you've been quiet for a while.
Yeah, I have, unlike me. Yeah, I think that just listen and be kind is my one bit of advice. It's not very earth-shattering, but it's real and it needs to happen.
Listen and be kind. Sean?
I would say have a plan. I think it's really important that you step back and have a plan, and you look at all of these things holistically rather than in piece, like, you know, like, oh, stick it on and it's done, but have a sort of link it back to what's your core values, what are you known for, and try and make sure that you are still true to those.
Excellent. And Julia?
Well, I agree with both of those, and I think definitely our core values have always been our guide. I think in any situation, so I would say the same. You know, think about what's important, listen to people, and I did something down earlier. I just wrote the well-being of the business is down to people. So I think that would be my one thing that I would take away from this. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go through a couple of questions here. So the first one is, and I can't see who it's from, but it's I'm afraid that the leaders in our business aren't keen on this focus. What would you advise me to do to elevate its importance?
Do you want me
Who
to
wants-
start? Well, I do think, stress the business case. I mean, it's pretty obvious that if people are not happy and not looked after, they're not going to perform for you. And I don't care in any business, that's just going to be the case. That's the way it is. I think it is really difficult if you've got business owners or senior leaders who don't get it. But, go on the Wellbee website, there's loads of evidence about why you should do it. It just makes sense. We're a people business. Can't look after your people in a people business, then that's pretty sad. And and it's awful, because probably people are stuck in jobs at the moment. Normally I'd say, well, go and work somewhere where they do get it, but you can't say that anymore because everybody's hanging on to their jobs. But you've got to keep chipping away at it and make it business focused. Don't make it do it because it's nice and it's the moral obligation, which of course it is. Do it because it's sensible for business.
I was going to say the same. I was going to, listen, what floats their boat will be numbers, will be statistics, will be like impact, revenues, profitability. And I think if you can hit it in a way to show them that, if we don't have a productivity element and the whole retention piece, even though, people will still go if they're not happy. And, as you said, there are still some jobs out there, maybe not what they want, but if they're not enjoying it, they probably bring their body, but they won't bring their heart and their head to work. And actually that will have a massive impact on the performance of their business. So I do think listen to play to their tune, so to speak, as Jane said.
I think what the pandemic's done is really put things into perspective for people. And I think people are not going to put up with working in not very nice places anymore, eventually. Because I do think it's, people have been at home with their families and they've chilled out and they've slept more and they've got themselves well in a lot of cases. And I think they're thinking, hang on, what was I doing that for? So I do think this will be a real shift towards being a great place to work. Is it ever more important? Because people just don't want to work in places now where they're not looked after. Why would you? Life's literally too short now and people know that. So beware.
Yes.
Employers.
Well, that is quite sobering. And I think, of course, there are jobs in other sectors. There may not be jobs in hospitality, but I mean, there are jobs in hospitality. There are still thousands of open vacancies in hospitality, but there are many more thousands of open vacancies in other sectors. And we will, of course, some of our hospitality people will need to go and work in those other sectors, but we don't want the best of our people to make that choice. So, I think it's a mistake to think people don't have choices to act with their feet. They do. Okay. I'm mindful of time, but there is one question here that I really wanted to highlight, which was, I'll read it out word for word, which is in essence, there is somebody on my team who is clearly unwell. How can I help them?
I think if you're not qualified to deal with it, don't try and dabble. Just find, the internet is a wealth of information, so find out what the issue is around and find a specialist for them to go to. It might be a health professional, it might be a counsellor or a coach or whatever it is, but always point them in the direction of the right thing. And if you're the sort of employer who could pay for that for them, that would be great. If you're not in a position to do that, there's loads of free advice. Mind are great for mental issues, for instance. There's loads of stuff out there, but just make sure they do it and give them the support, because it's really hard sometimes to go and ask for help. So make sure that you support them through it way without trying to solve it yourself, because we do solve things, don't they? And this is not an area where you can do stuff. Yeah.
Anyone else got any further points to add there as advice to that individual?
I would just say make sure they speak to somebody. If it's not you, make sure there's somebody else who they can feel comfortable to talk to. Make sure there's somebody who they can talk to. Yeah. I know obviously the professional advice is really important. They can redirect them, but it's just trying to get them to acknowledge what's wrong. And yeah, I would suggest that. Make sure there's someone that they can talk to. Yeah.
I was going to say the same. Start dialogue with them. Very often people are afraid to even approach that person. So just sit them down and say, listen, how can I help you? You know, they're looking pretty well at the moment. Things are not looking. How can I support you? What can I do to support you? And as you say, then maybe you signpost them to other tools if you can't deal with it. No.
And I think,
Absolutely.
sorry, that these issues are there. When we first did Wellbee, I showed it to quite a senior HR director, not Sean, and she said, "Oh God, that's opening a can of worms, isn't it?" So, you know, people sort of shy away from it. It's easier to sort of hide these things and be in denial, but it's very real. And if you don't start tackling it now, it's just going to all explode, implode in a few months' time, or maybe a couple of years' time. So I think don't shy away from it and don't minimise the importance of it, because it's huge. You know?
Yeah. So normalising it and signposting in that particular instance. I was thinking of Hospitality Action, of course. They are a fantastic support resource. Even if you don't have their EAP, they are there for individuals to call if they need assistance, and then they can then signpost on or help them. So Hospitality Action would be an immediate thought for me. And on that note, as we wrap up, I just wanted to mention that Catering.com is supporting mum who are running an amazing initiative which is called Walk for Calm. And Sean, you're supporting it too, aren't you? And I know everyone on this listening to this will start to get involved with this now. And the initiative is, in the last sort of couple of weeks of October, you can raise money by walking, skipping, running, pogo, whatever you do, roller skating, relay, a particular distance. Sean, can you remind me the exact distance? Is it 20?
So it's going to be flexible. So based on people's, you know, ability or desire. So you could do 5K, you can do up to 25K. You can do it as a small pod of 6 in a family group. You can do a dog walk or a cat walk, or you can do you can go out for a country walk. Whenever it might be just part of what you're doing, or you might want to do it as we're going to focus on 25K and we're going to do it as a group, or we're going to do it as a relay. So, you know, I'll do 4K today, my mum will do 4K tomorrow, my auntie will do 4K on Thursday. So it's just a way of bringing the family together, or work groups together, or friends together to support Calm, which is a campaign against living miserably, and also Hospitality Action. And we're just trying to do it because it's such a huge focus. Calm particularly focused on suicides, and so we are in that environment now where sadly that could be a real an increased spike in that for us if we don't support them. So it's raising funds and awareness for those two important charities.
Absolutely, and I think that is the thing, is those charities are hugely needed. That's a serious consideration, but the way in which this initiative is being run is a way of coming together, enabling well-being and having a bit of fun. And you mentioned it's important to laugh as well. So I'm going to finish that, and thank you very, very much, Jane, Julia, Sean. What a fantastic conversation. I know it's been useful to our listeners and our attendees. Sorry to those who I didn't answer the question for, but we will come back to you after the session. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Great.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.